Rochelle. Congratulations on starting middle school. Charla, my son's wife, beamed with pride as she celebrated our granddaughter Rochelle's achievement.
Thank you, Charla.
Charla opened her bag with a smile, taking out a box filled with freshly baked bread. You made this bread? Way to go, Charla. I clapped my hands in surprise, impressed by the seriousness of Charla, who normally didn't cook.
I thought I smelled something delicious. So you baked bread?
Harv said as he emerged from the shower, his hair still damp and a towel draped around his shoulders. He inhaled deeply, savoring the enticing aroma wafting through the kitchen. Too bad for you. Charla made this bread exclusively for Rochelle. There's none for you. I laughed as I spoke, and Harv looked a bit disappointed,
I see.
but chuckled good-naturedly, humming a cheerful tune. Charla reheated the boxed bread in the microwave and transferred it to a plate.
I made this for Rochelle, so make sure you eat it all, okay?
As Rochelle took the bread, she suddenly sneezed. Immediately, Harv abruptly reached for the plate of bread. And before anyone present could stop him, Harv tossed the bread, plate and all, into the garbage can and quickly closed the lid with a decisive thud. What on earth are you doing? How could you do something so cruel? Charla went to all the trouble to make that bread just for Rochelle. Unable to comprehend Harv's actions, I smacked his shoulder 2 or 3 times in reproach.
Nana, stop!
Rochelle grabbed my arm to stop me.
Pop, thank you.
Her eyes glistened with large, shimmering tears. My name is Bella, and I'm 60 years old. I work part-time at a local supermarket while living with my husband Harv, a civil servant. We have 2 children, but they're both independent now and have started their own families. Our son, Roland, rented an apartment within walking distance of our house, where he lived with his wife, Charla. Charla was a full decade younger than Roland.
Nice to meet you, Bella. I'm Charla. It's a pleasure.
When Charla was first introduced to us, Harv and I exchanged surprised glances. Charla, our son is over 30. Are you sure about this? Harv asked with concern, but Roland immediately retorted, with a laugh.
What's that supposed to mean?
Observing their interaction, Charla smiled.
I was a bit anxious at first, but seeing what a fun family you are puts me at ease.
Well, if you're okay with a family like ours, we'll be counting on you for the long haul. Harv and I quickly accepted Charla, won over by her bright personality and genuine warmth. According to Roland, Charla had lost her mother at a young age and had been raised by her father ever since. Her father had also passed away a year ago, leaving her with no living relatives.
That's why I want you and Dad to treat Charla like a real daughter.
Our son appealed to us with a serious gaze, and Harv and I nodded in agreement. Charla, from today onward, we'll treat you as our real daughter. And we want you to think of us as your true mom and dad.
Bella, Harv, I can't thank you enough. I'm so happy to have met Roland and his wonderful parents.
Charla's eyes brimmed with tears as she bowed her head repeatedly in gratitude. Due to his job in sales, Roland inevitably had to travel frequently for work. Whenever we had time, we would keep Charla company and engage her in conversation. Charla seemed to struggle with cooking, and when Roland wasn't home, she would always resort to buying pre-made meals from the grocery store. That's no way to live, dear. Come have dinner at our place every night.
Wouldn't it be a bother?
Although Charla politely declined, her face lit up with a radiant smile at the invitation. Nonsense. You're like a real daughter to us, so don't hesitate to rely on us a little. Besides, it's always just Harv and I. Having you around would brighten up our meals.
Well, if you insist, I'll gratefully accept.
From that day on, Charla began having dinner with us every evening. Additionally, Charla apparently had trouble keeping her place tidy. When I went to check on my son and daughter-in-law's apartment, I found the room littered with bags full of garbage and piles of laundered clothes.
Bella! I'm so embarrassed for you to see this mess.
Charla hastily tried to shove the garbage bags and laundry into the closet, her cheeks flushed with shame. You need to take out the trash on the designated days, and make sure to separate it properly according to the local rules. I went home to retrieve the community newsletter outlining the garbage disposal guidelines, and handed it to Charla. I'll come help clean whenever I have time too. Roland asked me to take good care of you, so don't hesitate to ask if you need anything. From then on, Charla began seeking our help at every turn, her requests growing more frequent and demanding.
There are weird bugs infesting the kitchen and I'm at my wit's end. I'm too scared to deal with it myself, so please. The laundry has piled up. Can you put it away for me? My friends are coming over to hang out. So could you go shopping for me instead?
After just 3 months, Charla's demands were escalating rapidly, her reliance on us becoming increasingly burdensome. Even the mild-mannered Harv grew suspicious.
Aren't we being a bit overprotective? If she can do things herself, we shouldn't let her rely on us for everything.
His brow furrowing in concern as he voiced his reservations. Some days, my part-time job would run late, and I'd return home exhausted. Even on those days, Charla would come over as if it were the most natural thing, handing me a basket overflowing with laundry. I showed you how to use the washing machine last time, remember? We have the same machine, so you should be able to do it at home, right? When I chuckled wryly, sighing in exasperation.
Oh, right.
Charla stuck out her tongue playfully.
When you scold me like that, Bella, it makes me happy. It feels like I'm being scolded by my real mother.
Seeing her suddenly display a lonely expression, I found myself unable to speak any harsher words. You're having dinner at our place tonight too, right?
Yes. Bella's cooking is the most delicious in the world.
Although I thought her phrasing was a bit over the top, I couldn't bring myself to turn away Charla when she acted so endearingly. After finishing dinner, as I was washing the dishes like usual, the landline phone rang.
I'll get it.
Charla, who had started getting ready to leave, picked up the receiver. I quickly wiped my wet hands on my apron, ready to take over the call at any moment.
Well then, I'll be heading home now. Thanks for the delicious meal today.
However, as Charla was about to leave, I hastily rushed out of the kitchen. Who was that on the phone just now?
It was a pushy salesperson. They've been calling a lot lately, and it's really troublesome. Be careful of scams and such. They often target elderly households.
You're right. The neighbors said they've been getting strange calls too, so they've stopped answering the phone. Thanks for the warning. It's reassuring to have you looking out for us.
Definitely, let's be cautious. Well, I'll see you again tomorrow.
With a bright smile, Charla left for the night. This routine continued for about a year. In addition to Roland, we have another child, a daughter named Georgina. Georgina is just a year younger than Roland and married her high school classmate, Wesley. Currently, they live in the neighboring state due to Wesley's job. The distance is not insurmountable by car, and we understand that our daughter's family has their own circumstances, and we can't expect them to come over often just because we're feeling lonely. Nevertheless, Georgina would occasionally call to update us on their lives. Guess what? Rochelle won the Gold Award at the speech contest last week.
Oh my, that's incredible!
We should celebrate the next time you visit. Think you could make it this weekend?
Well, I'm not sure. We just came for Christmas. And the next long break won't be until summer vacation.
After ending the call with Georgina, I always felt a twinge of loneliness. Georgina has a daughter, Rochelle, who is about to graduate from elementary school. Rochelle is our one and only grandchild, a precious light in our lives. She affectionately calls us Nana and Pop. Her love for us evident in every embrace. Up until a year ago, Wesley would drive the family to visit us every weekend without fail. Rochelle's laughter filling our home. Watching Rochelle energetically run around the spacious yard and rush to hug us. "Oh, why don't you just stay here and never go back home?" I found myself repeatedly voicing a half-joking plea.
No way. I have school tomorrow.
Rochelle would always take my jokes seriously, replying with a solemn face that only endeared her to us even more, her earnest nature tugging at our heartstrings. Every time I recalled her adorable face, I yearned to hear Rochelle's voice without reserve. "Why don't you come visit us sometime soon?" Inviting her over the phone at every opportunity.
I'm sorry, Nana. I have cram school tests next week, so I need to study. This week, I promised to go shopping with my friends. And over the weekend, our class is going on a camping trip.
Like clockwork, Rochelle would turn down my invitations, always citing one reason or another. Feeling a bit dejected, I would hang up the phone, only to have Harv gently pat my shoulder.
Rochelle is at that age now. She must be dealing with a lot, like studying and maintaining friendships.
His smile understanding and comforting. "You're right. It seems like she's working hard too. Things can't be like they used to, can they?" I had no choice but to convince myself to accept the changing times. Although we couldn't see each other as often as before, Rochelle would still call from time to time to share stories about school. Watching Rochelle grow from afar became a precious connection that sustained us through the passing years. As the day of Rochelle's elementary school graduation drew closer, the end of February fast approaching, Georgina called us with unexpected news.
Rochelle will be graduating from elementary school soon, right? This year. Her spring break is longer than usual. I was thinking of bringing Rochelle to visit you this time. What do you think? Would that be okay?
You're more than welcome. I'm sure Dad will be thrilled too.
But we just visited during Christmas. Are you sure it won't be a bother?
What are you even hesitating for? As if we'd ever turn down a chance to see our adorable granddaughter. That evening, when I told Harv about the plan, he grew even more excited than I was, his eyes sparkling with anticipation.
Of course, we'll welcome them with open arms. Why is she acting so reserved with us? This settles it. Let's throw a grand celebration for Rochelle's graduation and middle school entrance.
Harv was so overjoyed, he couldn't stop grinning throughout the entire meal.
Whoa there, Dad. You all right? Your fork's not moving.
At our son's remark, Harv snapped back to reality.
Ah, Charla got to see me acting all uncool. Forget what you just witnessed.
His cheeks flushing with embarrassment.
I'll pretend I didn't see a thing.
Charla laughed softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. That day, Roland had finished work unusually early and was having dinner with Charla at our place.
It's the last Sunday of the month, right? I've got a business trip that day. There's an important meeting with a client, so it'll be tough for me to make it. Come on, it's Rochelle's graduation and entrance celebration. Can't you do something? Don't be unreasonable. This is work we're talking about.
Roland gave a wry smile at Harv, who always lost all sense of boundaries when it came to Rochelle.
A celebration for her entrance into middle school? That sounds wonderful. I think I'll do my best for my cute little niece that day too.
Charla suddenly declared with a beaming smile, her enthusiasm infectious.
Do your best at what? Well, let's see. I'll cook something special.
What? You're going to cook? Are you sure about that? I feigned exaggerated surprise, but deep down, I was absolutely delighted. Charla, who never lifted a finger in the kitchen or with household chores, had just proclaimed she would put her heart into cooking for Rochelle's sake.
It's okay, right?
Of course it's okay. Oh, I can't wait to see what kind of dishes you'll whip up.
Thank you. All right then, I'll work hard and learn some recipes for Rochelle.
Seeing Charla's determination, everyone at the table burst into laughter. Before we knew it, the day of the celebration arrived. And our daughter's family came over from the neighboring state.
Hello, Nana. We're here.
Rochelle greeted me with a slightly more composed demeanor, as she stepped out of the car Wesley had driven. When she was younger, she would fling the car door open and immediately dash over to hug me. But now that she was 12, those days were behind her. To think that little Rochelle is already becoming a middle schooler. She's growing up so fast. As I lost myself in nostalgia, Georgina chuckled, finding my reaction peculiar.
We just saw each other at Christmas, but you're acting like it's been decades.
Well, even a single day without seeing my granddaughter feels lonely. It wasn't an exaggeration, those were my true, unfiltered feelings. Once my daughter's family settled into the house, I promptly began preparing dinner. On a typical evening, I only needed to cook for three: myself, Harv, and Charla. However, with the addition of Rochelle, Georgina, and Wesley, I had to prepare a significantly larger quantity of food. Without needing any prompting, Georgina readily pitched in, helping with the cooking and setting out the appropriate number of plates, knives, and forks. It was clear that Georgina's upbringing had been thorough and proper. Rochelle, too, seemed restless and kept popping her head into the kitchen.
What can I do to help?
She asked me as I bustled about, immersed in the preparations. Rochelle, you're the star of the show today. Why don't you just relax and watch some TV? I ushered Rochelle to the living room with a wry smile. If I didn't do this, the ever-responsible Rochelle would refuse to leave the kitchen out of consideration for me. On the kitchen sofa, Charla was sitting and watching TV the entire time. Charla, weren't you supposed to cook something for Rochelle today?
Of course I did.
Since the moment she had entered our house, Charla had been clutching a paper bag, refusing to let go of it. Rochelle, congratulations on your graduation. And congratulations on starting middle school. Charla beamed at her niece, her smile radiant with joy and pride.
Thank you, Charla.
Perhaps overwhelmed by Charla's enthusiasm, Rochelle seemed to shrink back a little, her voice barely above a whisper. Still grinning from ear to ear, Charla reached into the paper bag and pulled out a box. Oh my, you made bread? Way to go, Charla. Although Charla had been eager to cook for Rochelle, I hadn't been informed about what exactly she planned to make. Touched by Charla's dedication, especially considering her previous lack of culinary skills, I couldn't help but applaud her efforts.
I bought a cookbook and studied the recipes. Cooking is so much fun.
Perhaps elated by my praise, Charla's voice rang out with an unusual lightness and cheer.
Let me just borrow the microwave for a bit.
With those words, Charla carried the box into the kitchen. Harv emerged from the shower, toweling his damp hair.
I thought I smelled something delicious. Did you bake bread too?
Too bad for you. Charla made this bread exclusively for Rochelle. There's none for you. As I laughed and teased him, Harv looked a bit disappointed,
I see.
but chuckled good-naturedly.
If you'd like, I can make bread for Harv and Bella's wedding anniversary next time.
Charla returned from the kitchen, holding the box with a mischievous grin.
Now that's something to look forward to.
Harv smiled as he gazed at Charla's bread, his eyes softening with anticipation. Humming a cheerful tune, Charla transferred the bread from the box onto a plate.
I made this for Rochelle, so make sure you eat it all, okay?
Oh, it smells wonderful. Rochelle, you're so lucky to have someone make such delicious-looking bread for you. As Rochelle took the bread, she suddenly sneezed. Are you coming down with a cold? You're about to start middle school, so you need to take care of your health. No staying up late, all right? Just as I casually offered that reminder, Harv abruptly reached for the plate of bread. And before anyone present could stop him, Harv tossed the bread, plate and all, into the garbage can and quickly closed the lid with a decisive thud. What on earth are you doing? Unable to comprehend Harv's actions, I raised my voice and stood there.
Move out of the way!
Harv pushed past me and carried the garbage can out of the house. How could you do something so cruel? Charla went to all the trouble to make that bread just for Rochelle. When Harv returned, I smacked his shoulder 2 or 3 times in reproach.
Nana, stop!
Rochelle grabbed my arm to stop me. Her eyes glistened with large, shimmering tears.
Pop, thank you.
Rochelle's voice trembled as she expressed her gratitude to Harv. Rochelle, what's going on? Georgina, too, struggled to make sense of the unfolding situation, her gaze darting between Rochelle and Harv in bewilderment. Rochelle coughed, unable to answer coherently.
There were nuts in it.
Harv's face contorted as he spoke in a low, pained voice, a mixture of anger and sadness coloring his tone. Nuts? That can't be true. Rochelle had suffered from a severe nut allergy since birth. When she first started elementary school, just the scent of nuts in a candy bar had triggered a life-threatening asthma attack, landing her in the emergency room.
To think she was trying to feed Rochelle something so dangerous.
At Harv's growled words, Charla let out an exaggerated denial, her voice rising to a desperate shout.
That's not true. I had no idea Rochelle was allergic to nuts. I swear I didn't know. Please believe me.
Tears streamed down Charla's face as she frantically tried to defend herself, dropping to her knees in a pleading gesture. Stunned by the unexpected turn of events, we fell silent, forgetting to utter a single word. Just then, the doorbell rang, shattering the heavy silence that had settled over the room. The sky had grown dark outside, and a glance at the clock revealed it was past 8 p.m.
The house was so quiet, I thought no one was home.
Our son entered the room, shrugging off his suit jacket. Roland, didn't you say you had a business trip today?
That was the plan, but the client's schedule changed, so the meeting got pushed to next week. I hopped on a last-minute flight to come here.
Roland smiled and pulled a long, thin box from his bag.
It's a personalized pen for Rochelle. I was planning to give it to her later, but I'm glad I can do it today.
With those words, Roland approached Rochelle, perhaps sensing the unusual atmosphere.
Did something happen?
Roland asked with a serious expression.
It's the nuts. Charla made bread for Rochelle, and it had nuts in it. Charla didn't know Rochelle was allergic to nuts, so...
As Harv explained the situation, Roland's face instantly hardened, his jaw clenching tight.
You didn't know? Is that what you said?
Roland looked down at Charla, who was huddled on the floor, his gaze sharp and accusing.
There's no way you didn't know. I told you countless times. Didn't I? That Rochelle has a nut allergy, so you need to be careful. In fact, weren't you the one who asked if Rochelle had any allergies in the first place?
Is that true? Charla, did you knowingly try to feed Rochelle nuts even though you were aware of her allergy?
I stared at Charla in disbelief, my mind reeling from the revelation. Charla looked up at me with pleading eyes.
No, that's not it at all. I just forgot, that's all. I sometimes make mistakes like this, and it frustrates me to no end.
She tried to brush off her actions as a simple, unintentional error. Then, Georgina, who had been silently observing the scene, spoke up, her tone measured but firm.
Charla, that's not the only thing you're hiding, is it?
Her sharp gaze pierced through Charla as she questioned her.
What do you mean? There's more to this?
I felt as if everything I had believed in was crumbling before my eyes. And I feared I might lose my sanity. It was around the end of last year. Rochelle called to talk to Mom and Dad. But Charla answered the phone. And you know what she said to Rochelle? In a low, scolding voice. She told her, "Don't come over to play anymore." I was right beside her when I heard those words. And I couldn't believe my own ears.
That's a lie! Why would I ever say something like that?
Charla denied it vehemently, her voice trembling with emotion. However, Georgina refused to relent in her pursuit of the truth. Rochelle wrote countless letters addressed to Mom and Dad. But not a single one received a reply. Did you read those letters, Mom and Dad? At Georgina's question, I turned to Harv, but he shook his head in denial. Until that very moment, I had been completely unaware that such letters had been sent.
Is that true, Rochelle? You wrote letters and sent them to us?
Rochelle nodded. And while Mom and Dad were out at work, Charla took it upon herself to retrieve those letters from the mailbox and dispose of them. Didn't she? You even laughed as you told me about it yourself.
That's another lie. I never did anything like that, not even once.
Charla denied it once more, her voice rising in desperation. Georgina walked over to the landline phone. You see, this phone has an external automatic recording device installed for fraud prevention. Your conversation with Rochelle should be properly recorded. With a matter-of-fact tone, she specified the relevant date and time. Then pressed the playback button. Grandma and Grandpa are really bothered by it, you know. They find the phone calls annoying too. Rochelle, you're already in 6th grade, aren't you? Aren't you embarrassed to keep relying on them like a child? Well, I suppose I can turn a blind eye to the occasional phone call. But coming over every week is just inconsiderate, don't you think? Grandma and Grandpa are too kind to say it outright, but that's how they feel. Writing letters is pointless too. I tear them up and throw them away so they don't burden Grandma when she comes home tired from her part-time job. Listening to Charla's recorded voice, I was overcome by a wave of dizziness.
Charla, what is the meaning of this? When did I ever say that Rochelle was a bother?
Charla merely trembled, refusing to utter a word in her defense. Rochelle made me promise not to tell Mom and Dad because she didn't want to worry them. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not after you knowingly tried to feed her nuts despite her allergy.
Rochelle, Georgina. I'm her husband, and yet I had no idea. I'm so sorry.
Roland dropped to his knees, apologizing for allowing Charla to do as she pleased all this time.
It's okay, Uncle. It's not your fault.
I don't think there's cause for concern, but just to be safe, take her to the hospital immediately.
Harv instructed, his face tense with worry. Without hesitation, Wesley hoisted Rochelle onto his back and carried her to the car parked in the garage. After watching Georgina follow them out.
For now, I'm taking Charla home today. We need to talk about what happens next.
Roland fixed Charla with a terrifying glare.
No! I don't want to go back. Let me stay here forever.
Mom, Dad, I'm truly sorry about today.
Roland apologized to us repeatedly before forcibly dragging Charla, who refused to budge, back home with him. In the end, Roland and Charla officially divorced. As for why Charla had resorted to such foolish actions, Harv and I were shocked when Roland revealed her motive.
According to her, she couldn't stand seeing Mom and Dad, who usually doted on her, prioritizing and cherishing Rochelle over her.
You can't be serious. That's why she tried to hurt Rochelle?
For Charla, who lost her mother at a young age, Mom was like a real mother to her. But Mom loved her granddaughter Rochelle even more than she loved Charla. She must have been jealous, feeling like her mother was taken away from her.
Roland's next words pushed our anger towards Charla to its peak.
She showed no remorse at all. She said we were making too big a fuss over a mere allergy. She even laughed as she signed the divorce papers.
This isn't some harmless prank that can be brushed off.
You're right. This is a crime. We can't forgive Charla for hurting our precious granddaughter.
After discussing it among the three of us, Roland took a doctor's medical report to the police and filed a criminal complaint against Charla for assault. Upon her arrest, Charla admitted during the investigation that she had deliberately mixed nuts into the bread. Now, detained in a holding cell, Charla awaits the day of her trial. However, regardless of the verdict handed down to Charla, we will likely never see her again. Rochelle, now a middle school student, is happily sweating it out with her teammates in the softball club. On a day with a pleasant autumn breeze, I find myself at Rochelle's middle school.
Grandma, did you see me hit that ball?
Rochelle flashes me a carefree smile, unchanged from her childhood days. On that fateful night of her graduation celebration. If Harv hadn't realized Charla's true intentions, we might never have seen Rochelle's smile again. Thanks to Harv, who saved our precious granddaughter from crisis in the nick of time. Rochelle's future is now protected.
Grandma, what's wrong? You've been staring at my face for a while now.
It's nothing. I was just thinking about how adorable you are. No matter how many times I look at you.
What's that? Don't say weird things.
It's not weird at all. You are our irreplaceable treasure. When I said this with a serious face, Rochelle averted her gaze, looking a bit embarrassed, and ran off to join her friends. She says she wants to be a nurse in the future. Apparently, the nurse at the hospital we rushed to that time was so calm and reassuring. Rochelle found her dream for the future, wanting to become someone like that. I guess it wasn't all bad. Georgina spoke as she watched her daughter, who had grown so strong and resilient. Is that so? I was really worried after what happened. Rochelle is a tough girl, isn't she? I, too, will do my utmost to support and protect Rochelle's strength. To be there for her and help her as she moves forward into the future. My husband Curtis looked at me and snapped. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. It seemed like he wasn't worried at all. It's because you pushed her too hard, Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he declared, I'll go buy something to drink, and left the room. After a while, Curtis came back looking very anxious. You have only a year left to live, he said solemnly.
What?
I was surprised, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of.
No, I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that.
I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly burst into laughter.
Pfft. Ha ha ha.
Wondering what was going on, we both looked at Ashley. Then she turned to Curtis and dropped a bombshell. What are you talking about?
Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom?
The air froze. Dad, we know everything.
Hey Stella, isn't breakfast ready yet?
As usual, Curtis called out to me. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. It'll be ready soon, I answered while setting up the corn soup and bread on the table.
I told you I have a meeting this morning. I have preparations to make. Hurry up.
I placed the omelet on a plate in front of Curtis, who started eating without a prayer. After all, I was just preparing everything as usual. It was he who overslept. Suppressing my thoughts, I started doing the laundry. Once Curtis hurried out, I finally took a breath of relief. The morning news show started, and I took my breakfast to the lively sound of the TV. As a housewife, I spent my days like this, taking care of Curtis. After 25 years of marriage, with a lot of time spent alone at home, I've been thinking about picking up a hobby, but my shy nature always gets in the way, preventing me from taking the first step. Every day, I prepare breakfast for Curtis, do the laundry, clean, shop. I was getting bored with the repetition of the same days. I've thought about going to work, but I've been frail since I was young, and after giving birth to our daughter Ashley, I became even more prone to illness, so that was not an option. Will my life just end without anything changing? As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang. The sound of the front door unlocking was heard, and Ashley entered.
Mom, are you here?
She said, opening the door to the living room.
Welcome back.
Ashley sometimes comes back like this to check on me. When I'm not feeling well, she even helps with the housework. She's such a capable daughter. How are you feeling?
I've been doing quite well recently.
Ashley looked relieved to see my face, smiling gently.
That's good to hear. Then, how about we go out for lunch? You must be bored, right?
She suggested. We went to a restaurant near where Ashley works and talked about her recent life over the meal. These moments were a happy time for me, and also a break from the monotony of my daily life. After finishing our grocery shopping for dinner and returning home, Ashley set down the bags she was carrying and quickly went back to her own place. When I asked if she didn't want to see Curtis, "Dad's probably fine," she simply replied. Indeed, Curtis, at 48, still looked young for his age. He would work out at the gym after work, and lately, he even started caring about his looks, keeping his body fit and his skin lively. He always had high self-esteem, saying,
"I don't want to become someone who gives up just because they're getting older."
Compared to Curtis, I feel like an old woman, overshadowed by him and treated coldly. After Ashley left, a flyer on the table caught my eye. It was something that had been put in the mailbox. The flyer featured a beautiful woman. It seemed to be for a yoga class being held nearby, taught by an active model, offering reasonable prices for people of all ages. I wonder if I could manage yoga, given my frail health. But I found myself making excuses and tucked the flyer away between the pages of a newspaper. Looking at the clock, it was almost 5 p.m. I must start preparing dinner soon. If Curtis comes home and dinner isn't ready, he'll yell at me again. Since he was in a bad mood from the morning, I planned to make his favorite dishes. And so, I found myself preparing dinner for Curtis again, as usual. Around 7 p.m., Curtis came home. I immediately started preparing the shower. Curtis prefers to shower before dinner. While waiting for the shower to be ready, Curtis was drinking a can of beer and reading the newspaper in the living room.
Wow! Isn't she a beauty?
I was startled by his sudden outburst, only to realize he was looking at the yoga class flyer I had tucked in. Huh. A model and yoga instructor, huh. It's close to our house too. Hey, why don't you give it a try? He said, looking at me with a sarcastic tone. An old woman like me going there would just be a nuisance. I brushed it off lightly, but he sighed. You always say that. Try to take care of your body a little. It seemed he was also tired of my negative thinking. You used to be good in your younger days, but you're becoming more of an old woman day by day. He left those words behind and headed to the bathroom. When did I start to feel so miserable? It had become so routine that I seemed to have become numb to it. But even so, I can't go back to my younger days. I knew all too well that the reason I never took action was none other than myself. Envious of the radiant smile of the woman on the yoga class flyer, I felt like I was living in a world far removed from blaming someone or something else. On his next day off, Curtis left with the yoga class flyer. Are men allowed to go there too? It was a class held at a young woman's home. Wondering if that was really okay, I asked.
It says here people of all ages and genders. So it should be fine. I'm just going to observe. If it's not okay, I'll come right back.
He left the house cheerfully, leaving me behind. I wish he had taken me with him. Even though I had chosen not to go, I found myself blaming others again. Fed up with myself, I decided to go for a walk for a change of scenery. I wondered if I could catch a glimpse of what the yoga class was like, even if from outside. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Perfect for a walk. I walked at my own pace. Eventually, I reached the neighboring town where the yoga class was. I didn't remember the address from the flyer, but I had a rough map in my head. And so, I walked looking for the yoga studio sign. Yoga. Yoga. Then I realized. There were no signs for a yoga studio around here. I can't tell where it is. Just as I was about to give up and go back, I heard a familiar laugh. Turning the corner towards the sound, I saw a man and a woman I recognized, sitting at a garden table, enjoying tea. It was unmistakable. Curtis and the yoga class instructor. Not wanting Curtis to notice me, I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but they seemed to be having a great time. Despite being my husband, I was impressed that he didn't seem out of place even next to a young woman. Suddenly, I felt miserably shabby and pathetic. Unable to stay still, I quickly returned the way I came. Why do I always end up like this? All the way home, I kept blaming myself. It wasn't just about my deteriorated appearance. Above all, I needed to do something about this self-deprecating personality. I resolved to change. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner, Curtis came home in a particularly good mood. How was the yoga class? My heart raced, wondering if he knew I had seen him having a good time.
Yeah. It was fun. The teacher was around Ashley's age, but she had proper qualifications as an instructor and seemed very competent.
So she was that young. I wondered what kind of conversations they had, what made them enjoy their time so much. I became a bit curious. Maybe I should try yoga too. I murmured to myself, then. No, that would be impossible for you. Curtis looked me up and down exaggeratedly before laughing. There were a few others there, but none like an old woman like you. You'd just embarrass yourself. Hearing that, I got angry. I was jealous of the yoga instructor, but I had been trying to think more positively. Seeing my expression,
"If you're so angry, you should have done something about it sooner,"
he said dismissively before disappearing into the bathroom. I thought about attending on a weekday when Curtis wouldn't know, but I was sure they'd identify us as a couple based on our last name or address. If Curtis found out, he'd surely berate me. So, despite my resolve earlier in the day, I became gloomy and secluded myself. 3 months had passed since Curtis started attending the yoga class. He went there on his days off, not just for yoga, but it seemed he was also helping with minor DIY for home decor and other small errands.
"Isn't that something you shouldn't have to help with?"
I brought it up to Curtis, concerned, but he snapped at me.
"A girl around Ashley's age is in trouble, and you won't let me help her? Or do you think there's something shady going on? Ridiculous."
Even though he's not the kind to help around the house even when I'm feeling unwell. It was unbearable to feel like he valued the instructor more than me. But I couldn't neglect my household duties. I focused more on housework, and Curtis complained about me even more. Ashley, who occasionally came to help, said to Curtis,
"Dad, you're being too harsh on Mom."
But he dismissed her.
"That's Stella's job. If you've moved out, don't interfere."
Ashley, perhaps fed up with Curtis, started coming back when he wasn't around. Then one day, I finally fell ill and collapsed. Luckily, Ashley was coming home that day and took me to the hospital. Ashley was shocked to find me curled up in the kitchen, thinking her heart would stop. She even contacted my parents, who live nearby, and I was surprised to see them visit me in the hospital bed after the examination. I couldn't help it. "You're already frail," Ashley said, looking down. Who could blame her for worrying? "Thank you for worrying about me." After explaining the examination results to Ashley and my parents, they left the room, relieved. I was diagnosed with a gastric ulcer. After seeing my parents off, Ashley came back to the room to vent.
"I contacted Dad too. He's late, isn't he?"
I knew Curtis wouldn't leave work early to rush over for me. But it still felt lonely. "I'll come again tomorrow." "You'll need a change of clothes, right?" Ashley couldn't bear to leave me looking so forlorn. I was grateful to have raised such a kind daughter. That was my only pride. "I'll contact Dad again." "See you tomorrow." Ashley left, but Curtis didn't come to the hospital room that day. The next day, Ashley brought me the things I needed for my hospital stay. Looking somewhat guilty, Curtis was standing behind her. As soon as he saw me, he sneered.
"A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it."
He seemed not to be worried at all.
"You've been pushing her too hard,"
Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he announced,
"I'll go buy something to drink,"
and left the room. Really, I can't believe him, of all people. Ashley seemed thoroughly disgusted. I thought he might just leave, but surprisingly, he came back quickly and very anxious.
"You have only a year left to live,"
Curtis said, looking serious. It seemed it was no joke.
"What?"
I was shocked, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of.
"I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that."
I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly started laughing.
"Pfft. Ha ha ha."
Wondering what was going on, the two of us looked at Ashley. Then Ashley turned to Curtis and said something shocking. "What are you talking about?"
"Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom?"
The atmosphere froze. "Stella, are you okay?" "I came to check on you." Cutting through the tension, my parents arrived.
Grandma, Grandpa. I was just about to talk about everything.
So, we're doing it now. Dad was silent, but his glare kept Curtis from running away. Dad, we know everything. Ashley began to tell everything. It was about a month after Curtis started going to the yoga class. On her way home from our house, Ashley witnessed something unbelievable. That day, I had been telling Ashley about the yoga class. I reconsidered wanting to go myself and asked Ashley to check it out for me. I asked her to go and ask if it was really a kind of place that would make me feel out of place, like Curtis said. I could have gone myself, but I was scared.
Sure, I can even check it out on my way home today.
Ashley agreed cheerfully and went to the yoga class. When Ashley got close to the studio, she saw someone leaving the entrance. She quickly hid around the corner to see it was apparently Curtis and the instructor. Curtis was supposed to be at work that day, but Ashley couldn't have mistaken her own father. Feeling something was off, Ashley stayed hidden and watched. After a while of conversation, Curtis and the woman, after checking their surroundings, leaned in and kissed. Ashley was shocked and couldn't suppress her feelings of contempt after seeing her father like that. That's why she started coming home only when Curtis wasn't there. After watching Curtis leave, Ashley immediately contacted me.
Mom, you'd better stay away from there.
Ashley, usually so positive, saying something like that made me ask what was wrong, but she wouldn't say.
I just feel like you and that instructor wouldn't get along.
Looking back, it must have been Ashley's kindness trying not to alarm me. Unaware, I regretted missing another chance to go to the yoga class, but a few days later, while walking near the studio again, I spotted a suspicious woman hiding by a fence, seemingly trying to peek inside.
How disturbing.
Approaching, I realized it was Ashley. What was she doing? She hadn't noticed me approaching. Not wanting to startle her, I stopped and called her mobile, hoping it was someone else, but knowing it was Ashley. My wish shattered when she noticed the call from me and walked away from the studio to answer.
Hello, Ashley? What are you doing there?
I asked, sighing. Surprised, Ashley looked around and saw me. And when she saw me in the distance, I'm coming over. She ended the call and hurried to me.
I thought there was some suspicious person.
Seeing my disapproving face, she looked awkward.
So, what were you doing?
Staring back at me, she said.
We'll stand out here, let's talk somewhere else.
Deciding something, she began walking.
We can go to our house since Curtis won't be back yet.
Feeling the seriousness, we headed home. Upon arriving home, I made some tea. After taking a moment to relax, I once again asked Ashley. So, what were you doing there?
That's the yoga studio Curtis attends, right?
I had previously asked her to scout the place for me, to see what the atmosphere was like, but I thought that matter had been resolved then.
Look, before I say anything else, I want you to know that I'm always on your side, no matter what.
Starting with that, Ashley told me everything she had seen. On the day she went to observe the yoga studio, she saw Curtis and the instructor coming out looking cozy. They talked intimately and kissed after checking their surroundings. She had been hesitant to tell me, carrying the burden alone to avoid hurting me. I wanted to believe in Dad, too, Ashley said, sipping her tea. She had wanted to believe, so she kept going back to the yoga studio. But contrary to her hopes, Curtis was frequently there, getting along well with the instructor.
I was thinking, if I could somehow catch them in the act.
If she had proof, she could confront Curtis. She thought by having something over him, she could make him stop treating me badly.
I could have been reported for stalking.
Discovering her there helped Ashley regain her composure.
Yes.
Despite hearing about Curtis's affair, I somehow remained calm. I had suspected something beyond just yoga lessons. Curtis denied it, but I lacked the courage to delve further.
Hey, Mom. Are we just going to leave things as they are?
Ashley looked at me worriedly.
If you're up for it, I'm willing to help.
I immediately understood what she was hinting at.
You're asking if I'm considering divorce?
Ashley just nodded without saying a word. What do I want? I asked myself. Honestly, even if I decided to divorce, I wasn't sure I could make it on my own. Having been a housewife all this time, could I really find work? Plus, there were my health concerns. Ashley offered her support, but I couldn't always depend on her. Sensing my deep thought, Ashley reassured me. Even if you decide not to divorce, like I said earlier, I'm always on your side. And left before Curtis came home. Curtis arrived and immediately started complaining about everything as usual. The taste of dinner, the cleanliness of the house, as if he was searching for faults on purpose. Had it not been for the discussion with Ashley earlier, I might have been able to ignore it, but today I couldn't. Hearing the facts from Ashley, everything Curtis did started to disgust me. His voice, being in the same room, everything felt repulsive. That night, after Curtis had gone to sleep, I decided to check his mobile phone in a desperate search for evidence. If there was proof, I would divorce him. I knew it was wrong, but the betrayal started with Curtis. Convincing myself, I checked his phone. But my last hope was shattered. Texts and photos with the instructor, undeniable evidence of his affair, were there. Quietly closing the phone, I went to the living room and lay down on the sofa. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same room.
I'll contact Ashley first thing tomorrow.
And that's how our plan began. Ashley and I decided to inform my parents first. If the divorce went through, I'd move back to my parents' house. So, it was necessary to explain the situation. Hearing this, my parents were furious. After discussing it as a group, we decided to act at the moment that would make the yoga instructor the happiest. During her surveillance, Ashley found out the instructor apparently had another man.
I'll attend the yoga class and gather information.
Saying that, Ashley started attending the yoga class and got closer to Curtis's mistress, Hilda. It turned out, just as Ashley had guessed, Hilda was engaged and planning to get married in a year.
We'll target that time to demand alimony in the divorce trial.
Ashley was oddly enthusiastic, but I felt heavy-hearted. I was anxious about whether I could let Curtis be free for so long and act as if everything was normal. Even now, just living in the same house made me feel sick. My anxiety and the stress of living with Curtis culminated in me developing a gastric ulcer. After telling me all that had happened,
honestly, I didn't realize you were under so much stress. I'm sorry,
Ashley said. When I was taken to the hospital, she discussed with my parents and decided to change the plan to immediate divorce and claim alimony. Hearing Ashley's story, Curtis just hung his head in silence.
The 1 year left you heard about was referring to your mistress Hilda's modeling career.
Ashley spoke coldly and formally to Curtis.
There's no need for such drastic measures. A normal divorce would suffice. Don't destroy someone's happiness like that.
Hearing Curtis prioritize Hilda's happiness over our divorce, I felt an anger like never before. Before Ashley could retort, I confronted Curtis.
The one who has been destroying my happiness talks now.
Curtis looked at me as if bitten by his own dog.
After all the exploitation, not caring about my health, but worrying about another woman, it's disgusting.
I had never known I could despise someone so much. It was the first time I realized that I had such feelings inside me.
Disgusting, you say? You don't have the right to talk back to me.
My negative emotions were overflowing. Ashley tried to intervene, but she seemed bewildered by my anger. Just as I was about to lash out at Curtis again, Mom intervened softly. "That's enough, Stella." Her voice was gentle and comforting. A voice I'd known since childhood. I snapped back to reality. After a moment of silence, Mom calmly addressed Curtis. "Curtis, I've heard the situation from both Ashley and Stella, but I haven't heard it from you." Curtis looked uncomfortable. "If you have any justification, we're listening." Her voice, different from when she scolded me earlier, now carried a chill. "I don't have any excuses," Curtis stammered. "So, you admit everything is true?" Seemingly accepting his fate, Curtis defiantly admitted.
Yes. I love Hilda, not Stella. I can't help it. Stella no longer attracts me."
"That's terrible," Ashley muttered.
"Terrible, you say? Which is worse? I thought Hilda and I loved each other. But to think, Hilda had another man."
It seemed Curtis didn't know about Hilda's fiancé. He trembled, fighting back tears. "Do you understand what you're saying?" Mom confronted Curtis. "After making Stella feel the same way, how dare you feel sorry for yourself only?" Curtis looked down, unable to raise his face. Ashley and Mom spoke for me, but I felt nothing for Curtis anymore. I just wanted to be away from him. That was my only wish. "With the divorce, we'll also be claiming alimony from you and Hilda, so please leave for today," I told Curtis formally. He stood up weakly, avoided our gazes, and left the hospital room. I cried over the wasted time I had spent with such a man. After being discharged, Ashley and I went to Hilda's yoga studio. It was under the guise of Ashley canceling her membership, but we intended to tell Hilda everything. However, just as we were about to start, Curtis barged in. As we stood dumbfounded, Curtis snatched Hilda's mobile phone from her resisting hands and called her fiancé. In a fit of desperation, Curtis exposed everything to the fiancé and laughed maniacally. After fiddling with Hilda's phone, he threw it at her and left, making deliberate noise with his steps. As Hilda sat on the floor, I told her, "That was my husband. Why has it come to this?" Hilda looked up at me with surprise, but retorted,
"That man approached me. If you're his wife, you should at least teach your husband some manners."
"I'm getting divorced, and we have all the evidence of the affair," Ashley countered with equal fervor. "Whatever you think, we will be claiming alimony in the divorce trial." Realizing talking here wouldn't make Hilda admit anything, I decided to leave her house with Ashley. Later, Hilda tried to make excuses to her fiancé, but since Curtis had exposed irrefutable photos and messages, her engagement was called off. Furthermore, since Hilda's fiancé was the owner of the entertainment agency she belonged to, she ended up being blacklisted from modeling work. Of course, her yoga studio, financed by her fiancé, was closed down soon after. This story was briefly mentioned in gossip magazines, so whether it was entirely true or not is uncertain. However, a for lease sign was definitely posted on the yoga studio's house. Faced with undeniable evidence, Curtis and Hilda couldn't resist and had to comply with the compensation claim. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house for a while, but moved due to harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Both Curtis and Hilda probably thought they could handle the situation at first, but eventually fell apart. Chased by the alimony payments, Curtis lost his money for gym and beauty treatments, his appearance deteriorated, yet he still made advances on young women at work and ended up being sued. He was fired from his job and even in his new job was relegated to a menial position, spending his days alone organizing documents and supplies. He blamed me for his downfall, claiming it was all because I discovered the affair and filed for divorce. As seen in the tabloids, Hilda, after being abandoned by her fiancé, was sued for the yoga studio's business expenses and chased by debt. She blamed me for her misfortune. My parents quickly sold their house and bought a condominium where the four of us could live together. The condominium has excellent security, so we no longer need to fear harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Feeling it pathetic to rely solely on Ashley's income and my parents' pensions, I learned to use a computer from Ashley and started working from home. I'm surprised to find I had such a talent. Today, I'm writing a column about life's battles. My life might have been an uneventful housewife's, but this divorce saga is sure to attract attention. While adding a bit of color to the story, I type the words. My face is wrapped in a gentle smile. I don't think you should go on that trip, I said with a cold voice, only to be met with an annoyed glare from my husband. He was getting ready to join his company's retreat, clearly not thrilled about my input.
Look, it's not like I'm going out to play. It's a social obligation, and I can't just not show up without a good reason,
he retorted in a mocking tone, followed by an exaggerated sigh. Well, I've warned you. Just don't regret it later, I responded. My name is Grace. Currently, I'm a 28-year-old housewife. Anthony, my husband, and I have been together since our college days and got married after we both started working. He's 2 years older than me, and we got closer because we were in the same club. Well, to be more accurate, I joined the club because I was attracted to him. When I was a freshman, I was club hopping with some new friends I made. That's when I met Anthony, who was exceptionally noticeable due to his good looks while handing out flyers as the head of the club. One of my friends fell for him instantly and decided to join the club even before hearing what it was about. Eventually, dragged along by her enthusiasm, the rest of us submitted our membership forms and started participating. Unlike in middle or high school, I figured if I didn't like the club since it was just a hobby, I could just leave. That was the mindset of my other friends too, and we had agreed to join something anyways. Deep down, I also found Anthony charming. However, when the friend who had decided to join because of him started making moves, I decided to step back. Plus, there were quite a few other fans of his, making it difficult to get close. But how did I end up marrying him, you might ask? It was during the cultural festival that year, where our relationship rapidly developed. We were part of the music club, which performed in several groups during the festival. Anthony and I, along with a few others, ended up forming a band. For the first time, I felt genuinely glad to have joined the club and practiced an instrument. Discovering the joy of playing, I spent my free time in the club room. As the festival approached, I was there even more often. Sometimes, it was just Anthony and me, and through these moments, we grew closer and started dating after the festival, with me making the first move. However, after our successful performance at the festival, Anthony gained more admirers, and I chose to keep our relationship a secret. I wanted to brag about being with him, and he said it was unnecessary to hide. But he didn't understand my fear of other women's jealousy. We often targeted weekdays when it was less crowded for our outings. It felt like a secret date, which was fun in its own way, and I cherished the time I could spend with my husband. But then, he started his job search. Until he got an offer, even my usually calm husband was understandably tense. He seemed to have less time for part-time jobs, often complaining about being broke every time we met. Since the days we could meet were getting fewer, I secretly increased my shifts and used the money I earned to cook for him. I feel pathetic having to rely on this, he would say, yet he happily devoured every meal I made. From that time, I vaguely imagined our life together as a married couple, though I thought it was too soon to mention it to my busy boyfriend. Eventually, when he landed a job and graduated, and I had my graduation confirmed, we got engaged. He rented a new apartment due to his job, and I often visited, almost living there. We were in a semi-cohabiting state, but he paid for the rent and utilities with his salary, so I helped out with household chores in return. I would make meals to last several days and store them in the fridge, take out the trash in the morning, and clean the bathroom and toilet. I thought I was doing well, but it turned out my husband was quite lazy. When I couldn't come over for a week due to some errands, I found the floor littered with trash. Maybe because it was his first year working, he often had entertainment duties and would leave the room unventilated. Opening the door to a room filled with the smell of sweat and garbage required bravery. But I loved my hard-working husband, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness, like bringing home fancy sweets to say thank you. After graduating, I worked in an office for a year, but then, at my husband's strong request, I became a housewife. The reason was simple. I want you to take care of the house. His lifestyle habits remained the same, with me handling most of the household chores. Additionally, the number of drinking parties increased over the years, making financial management challenging. However, since we lived on my husband's income, it was hard to ask him to cut down on social gatherings. He was supportive when I occasionally met with friends, even giving me some pocket money for those outings. But I couldn't stay silent and watch our household expenses increase, so I brought it up with him several times. At first, he would say, "It's okay, the entertaining expenses are covered by the company. The money comes back." But gradually, he started giving specific reasons, like, "Today is a colleague's birthday," or "I can't miss a promotion celebration." It became harder for me to object. My husband had a close group of friends at work. I heard from a university friend who also landed a job there. That friend was the one who had a crush on him and led us to join the club. She was already married and said it was a coincidence that she ended up working at the same place as my husband. When I mentioned my husband was Anthony, she had to think for a moment. Who was that again? It seems she had completely forgotten about the man she once eagerly pursued. She told me a lot about my husband. He was always with his close-knit group, and there were no other women involved, which was a relief. But the weekly spending on drinks was a problem. I kept asking him to cut back on the drinking sessions, but he couldn't refuse invitations from dear friends. Even when I argued about the expenses, he only suggested reducing the amount spent per occasion instead of not going at all. Looking back, we should have had a serious discussion about this early in our marriage. As time went on, things became more ambiguous, and I started to give up. My husband stopped mentioning his outings unless I asked, and it seemed like he had created his own rule of going out on weekends. Approaching his 30s, he hadn't changed his living habits from his student days, only capable of leaving his clothes on the floor. I had gotten used to taking care of him, so even though I was frustrated, I stopped bringing it up. I figured if we were going to fight about it, I might as well let him do what he wanted. Then one day, my husband mentioned he would be joining the company's retreat. A company retreat when it's not even a long weekend? If it were during a long weekend, everywhere would be crowded. The idea is to go at a different time so we can actually relax. He explained. I'm okay with him participating in the trip since he's been working hard. But the cost is what worries me. Even if the travel expenses are covered, things like meals and souvenirs will likely be out of pocket. With the warmer days, his drinking outings have become more frequent, and our expenses have grown more severe. And there's something about this retreat that's bothering me. Maybe you should skip it? You've been really busy lately and must be exhausted. It's a work obligation, and everyone's expected to go. He said, though his expression softened. He seemed really keen on going. For once, I pressed harder. Are you sure you want to go? We can't afford to spend more right now with all our bills. Thinking I was angry, he raised his voice.
Are you seriously telling me not to go now? You say we don't have money, but it's all coming from my salary anyway. Don't act so high and mighty.
It seems he made me a housewife just to say this, thinking it would silence me. True to form, I stayed quiet, and he, feeling reassured, said,
You've had fewer friends since we got married. You're just jealous of me.
I was irritated but too dismayed to retort. Who's been sacrificing social ties to keep this household running? I was on the verge of saying it, but lacked the energy to bother. Fine, do whatever you want. At that, he momentarily looked triumphant. Then patronizingly patted my head, asking sweetly,
What would you like for a souvenir?
Ever since college, he's believed his wife adores him. Having been quite popular, his self-esteem seems quite inflated. His life has been so charmed that his lack of malice is actually more problematic. Turns out, the trip was set for the very next day, and he left early in the morning, full of enthusiasm. Surprisingly, he managed all the preparations himself, dragging along a neat suitcase he must have bought at some point. During the week he was gone, I had a peaceful time. It made me wonder if this is how it feels when your children are grown and independent. I've essentially been raising a large child for years. Taking a week off won't hurt. By the time he returned from the trip, it was already late at night. He seemed a bit worn out, probably from taking the night bus.
Were you okay this week? I was worried about the bills and everything.
Yeah, everything was fine, I assured him.
See, I told you there was nothing to worry about. I'll start earning again from next week, so don't fret,
he said, perhaps a bit smugly after drinking on the bus. I was annoyed but didn't show it, simply replying, Maybe so, and tried to leave. However, he didn't like my response and shouted after me,
What's with that attitude?
As he's gotten older, he tends to get angry suddenly when he got drunk. I was surprised at first, but now it's become routine whenever he returns from drinking.
I'm tired too. Please don't raise your voice. Make sure all your laundry is in the basket, and if there's trash, sort it out.
I'm going to bed now. He said something else, but I quickly went to bed. The next morning, his phone rang early. Annoyed, he got up, glanced at the screen, and clicked his tongue. I took the day off. What now? It was his office calling. He got up, left the bedroom. And I secretly watched, somewhat predicting what would happen next. After a few minutes on the phone, he changed into a suit and left the house. Wondering when he would come back, I woke up to wash the pile of clothes he had left behind. It was a few hours later when my husband returned. As soon as he entered the house, he called out to me, shouting,
This is all your fault for causing such a mess.
Let's rewind to a week ago. In the evening, after hearing about the company retreat from my husband, I immediately called a friend. I had never heard about the retreat from her, despite our daily chats. When she said,
There's no company retreat,
I realized something. My husband probably lied about going on the retreat to avoid being stopped by me. Perhaps to hang out with those colleagues, or maybe even to meet another woman. Either way, I no longer cared. Who would sympathize with a husband who lies and abandons his wife to go out? Before I knew it, I was asking my friend for a favor. To report this to the company. After all, we were barely making ends meet. There was no way he could afford a week-long trip on his own. If the retreat was a lie, where would the money for it come from? Though I didn't want to think about it, my friend and I eventually came to the same conclusion. I told her it would be great if she could say she was the one who leaked it. My friend seemed to have acted immediately. The company waited for them to return from their trip and then called them in. During that time, the company thoroughly investigated them. What followed was a series of records of misused expenses being uncovered. Their desks were found to be filled with blank receipts from various stores. They likely used these to falsely claim expenses for their numerous drinking outings, applying this money towards their trip this time. This was mostly accurate, and they admitted their guilt when called in.
We plan to submit it as a business expense for the retreat,
they confessed. Everyone involved had repeatedly misused expenses, leading to a total loss of around several $1,000s. Naturally, they were all dismissed and faced claims for restitution and damages. Furious upon returning, my husband yelled at me,
"This is all your fault."
I don't know why he thought I reported him to the company. Since my friend was the one who actually reported it, I was relieved she wouldn't be harmed. Ignoring his own actions, he raged in front of me, where I presented him with the already filled-out divorce papers.
"Getting caught was your own fault. That's why I told you to cancel the trip. But if you've been doing this all along, it was bound to come out sooner or later."
Though he glared and trembled, he snatched the divorce papers, saying,
"I'm better off without a snitching, spiteful wife,"
and threw them at me as if to slap me with them.
"Good, this makes things easier. Goodbye, then."
With that, I left, carrying the bags I had already packed. He kept his back to me until I left the room, perhaps out of pride. I caught a glimpse of his graying hairline and felt a twinge of sadness for the Anthony I once admired. Then, I headed to the small apartment I had already arranged. I never thought I'd use my savings from a year of work this way. Although I had some savings, the initial moving costs significantly depleted. Now, I need to find a job. After being a housewife for so long without any particular qualifications, I wonder if I can find work. At first, any job will do. I decided to work and become independent. After informing my parents about the finalized divorce, I also contacted my friend. One of them, concerned about me, suggested we meet up after a long time. That's right. Now that I'm divorced, I should live my life freely. I won't be forced to do household chores for anyone else. I just need to take care of myself. What a freedom. The next day, after spending a day unpacking, I immediately started looking for a job. I found some listings on job sites, prepared my applications, and went for interviews. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed while I was busy with this routine. The calls from my ex-husband became more frequent. On the other end of the phone, Anthony alternated between anger and tears. Having relied on me for household and financial management, he had run out of money within these 2 weeks. He had no savings habit, so his account was completely empty. With several bills due at the end of the month, Anthony asked me for a loan, saying, "We're divorced, so I have no obligation to pay for you. If you really need a loan, are you okay with interest?
Why do you have spare money? Aren't you ashamed to have been saving secretly just for yourself? This calls for a redistribution of property. Come back right now."
Anthony, infuriated by my advantageous position, screamed so loudly the audio cracked.
"It's fine if you want to claim a redistribution of property, but that process is complicated and time-consuming. By the time you get it sorted, the month's end will be here. Then come over right now and give me half. Or remarry me for a while and take care of me."
Frustrated by Anthony's self-centered demands, I ended the call without a word. I realized there was no getting through to him, and the thought of still being liked by him became physically repulsive. Of course, after setting my phone to block his calls, they stopped. Eventually, I secured a job at a food factory. Wanting to avoid any trouble with Anthony, I opted for a behind-the-scenes role. Working and sweating after a long break felt refreshing. Being single again, I reconnected with friends from my student days and started going out more. After a few meetings, my friends said I looked rejuvenated, and I felt a profound sense of fulfillment in my daily life.
I never imagined our house could be burgled,
I muttered to myself. The day after our home was burglarized, I still couldn't grasp that it had happened to me. I was reflecting on my inability to act at the moment. Mother-in-law, concerned, hurriedly asked,
"Did you see the face of the culprit?"
However, an event that would save me from despair happened shortly after. My name is Mia. I'm 29 years old. I was married to Thomas, a year older than me, and we had a reasonably happy life. But recently, after losing Dad, I've felt a gaping hole in my heart. Dad gave me not only a lot of love, but also many lessons. Even after retiring, Dad never felt left behind by the current times. I remember him studying about money with enthusiasm, even as many others settled into a quiet life receiving their pensions. Dad continued to learn new things after retirement, never stopping despite my concerns. Worried, I suggested, "Dad, you've retired from your job. Why not take a break for a while?" But Dad, with a cheerful smile, replied,
"I've worked hard for many years and can't suddenly stop. I'm just doing things I'm interested in as my way of preventing dementia. Don't worry about me."
Half in disbelief yet fond of Dad, I watched over his actions, thinking if it's what he likes, then it's okay. When I got married, Dad was overjoyed, saying,
"I'm relieved to see Mia so happy. I have no regrets in this world,"
with tears in his eyes. My husband and I, telling Dad to stop joking, laughed together. A few days after the wedding, Dad and I spent some father-daughter time together, during which he said,
"Mia, I'll leave you plenty of money, so don't worry about finances even if you start a family."
To which I replied, "Dad, I appreciate the thought, but don't waste your retirement like that. Actually, I want to take you on a trip. Let's enjoy some leisure time together." I thought I'd finally be able to show my gratitude. However, Dad, who had been so vibrant, suddenly passed away, and I was left feeling hopeless after the funeral. Seeing Dad's inheritance was shocking. Gold bars? I was speechless at the sight, not knowing their significance initially. But I soon learned of Dad's intentions. Research revealed that gold bars hold their value over years, hardly depreciating. Dad left me a lasting fortune to secure my future even decades after his passing. Reflecting on it, Dad often said,
"In today's world, the value of money can fluctuate, so Mia, you should do your research."
At the time, I dismissed it due to daily busyness. Realizing now that Dad converted his wealth into gold bars to leave it for me, I couldn't be more grateful. Wanting to honor Dad's wishes, I kept the gold bars hidden even from my husband. Yet, someone had the audacity to say,
"I heard Mia's dad passed away, so you must have gotten a hefty inheritance, right? Share some with me."
Shockingly, these words came from my husband. His words were so unthinkable that I didn't respond. Then he said,
"I've been feeling unmotivated at work and thinking of quitting to make a quick fortune. Winning a little makes me feel recognized, and it'd be a relief for you too if I became wealthy, right?"
Realizing what he meant, I asked,
"Is that some kind of gambling?"
He boasted,
"Well, kinda. But I'm not like those unsuccessful gamblers."
I thought about discussing and deciding together on necessities like a house or car for us as a couple. But then, my husband started saying,
"I also want to upgrade everything I wear to high-end brands."
I was speechless, not knowing he was this kind of person. I decided to keep it stored in a safe that only I could access. To me, what Dad left behind is as precious as life itself. I couldn't bear to squander it on my husband's whims, so I refused. However, since he wouldn't give up asking, I took the bold step of consulting my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law had been supportive since I was dating her son and continued to be so after marriage. After I told mother-in-law everything, she listened, nodding, and said, "I'm sorry about this. Let's have a discussion, the three of us." When I mentioned to my husband that we would discuss Dad's inheritance with mother-in-law, he seemed thrilled, thinking his wishes would finally be met. Later, eager to state his case, he said,
"Given the uncertainty of lifelong employment, I've been working on a side hustle. I'd like a share of Mia's dad's inheritance to make it successful."
A side hustle, or rather, gambling. I almost blurted out, but mother-in-law immediately mentioned, "I saw you entering a slot shop recently." The room froze at her words. My husband made feeble excuses but was asked by mother-in-law to show his savings, revealing almost nothing. Mother-in-law scolded him with an expression I'd never seen before. "Thomas, enough is enough. Work properly without complaints. If you target me as Dad's inheritance again, I won't forgive you." Yet, my husband responded with dissatisfaction.
Okay, I get it. But you're both taking a joke too seriously,"
I said. "There are things you can joke about and things you shouldn't." To which mother-in-law added, "Exactly. Haven't I always taught you that?" Embarrassed by the scolding from both of us, he left for home as if fleeing. I thanked mother-in-law, saying, "I couldn't have persuaded him alone." "Thank you." Mother-in-law replied, "It's okay. Thank you for marrying such a son." In return, she thanked me. Then she muttered, "Thomas really is a handful." I didn't miss a word and asked, "Does that mean Stephen too?" Mother-in-law nodded slightly. I knew Thomas had a brother named Stephen but hadn't really spoken to him. We only greeted each other during a family meeting, and I remembered his voice being deeper than Thomas's. I regret not having tried to interact more, not knowing how to approach him. I took this opportunity to ask mother-in-law about brother-in-law. Mother-in-law said, "Stephen quits jobs as soon as he dislikes them and is currently freelancing. I'm worried about his future. I wish he would settle into a stable job, but job changes are becoming more common these days." Mother-in-law continued, but it seemed brother-in-law's reasons for quitting were somewhat trivial. Mother-in-law had been worried for a long time. I couldn't admonish brother-in-law myself, so I just listened to mother-in-law, who had been worried for a long time. Worried about mother-in-law's well-being, I bought a concert ticket for her too. And we decided to go together, hoping it would help her relax and refresh. On the day of the concert, my husband had already left for work, and I was looking forward to it with mother-in-law. But after walking a bit, I felt like I had forgotten something. After rummaging through my bag, I realized in horror. I'm sorry. I forgot the most important thing, the tickets. When I told mother-in-law, she surprisingly said, "It's okay. We can go back and make it. Let's go together." I'm sorry. Please wait here. I'll run back and get them. And ran off. I burst through the front door, heading straight for the room. There, in front of the safe containing Dad's inheritance, I encountered a person clad entirely in black. In my haste, and unsure if I was dreaming or awake, I screamed. The burglar shoved me aside and fled. Although I was confused about what was happening, I confirmed the burglar had taken the gold bars, and immediately called the police. I explained everything to mother-in-law at home and apologized. When the police arrived and I was describing the burglar's features and the situation, mother-in-law rushed over to my house, anxiously asking,
"Mia, are you okay? You really encountered the burglar?" Did you see his face? Did you tell the police everything? I shook my head in despair.
While mother-in-law was saddened, I reassured her. It's okay. The police are here, taking my statement. Then, looking at the safe, mother-in-law lamented. Oh, what a mess. I hadn't shared the code or hiding place with anyone. Although it was only until I could deposit them in a bank safe, the safe I had chosen was among the most secure available commercially. Supposedly impervious to ordinary household tools. The police, having seen the scene, speculated that the burglar either had specialized tools or was an experienced criminal. I continued to provide details to the police. Afterwards, I told mother-in-law. The investigation will start now, and it might take a while, so please go back home and rest for now. I'm sorry for today. Mother-in-law responded.
All right. I don't want to be in the way. I'll contact you later.
And left. However, mother-in-law returned about an hour later, drenched in sweat.
Mia, listen,
she exclaimed, causing me and the police to freeze and turn towards her. What happened? I asked, to which mother-in-law revealed.
When I went back, I saw Stephen entering his room with something that looked like gold bars. I thought I should get evidence before confronting him, so I didn't question him right away. It's about your dad's inheritance, isn't it?
When mother-in-law mentioned that, I immediately responded.
It's the gold bars.
Mother-in-law said.
Understood. Now, listen to this.
And played a recording from her phone for us.
I managed to get the stuff out, but Mia caught me at the worst possible moment.
Really screwed up there.
And knowing how she showed up just then.
The recording clearly captured someone speaking foully. That low and distinctive voice was unmistakably Stephen's. I was certain of it. It also captured a strategy session over the phone with my husband on how to deceive the police if questioned. After recording the scene, mother-in-law, though shocked, submitted it to the police. Apologizing, mother-in-law said, I'm really sorry for causing you distress. I just thought I had to secure some evidence. I quickly assured her. You did nothing wrong, Thomas's mom. My primary concern is catching the burglar as soon as possible. Your evidence was incredibly helpful. Thank you. The police immediately headed to brother-in-law's location, where he confessed to conspiring with my husband.
Thomas wanted the gold bars to pay compensation to his mistress's husband.
Brother-in-law revealed. Mother-in-law and I were stunned, blurting out.
What? An affair?
Nodding, brother-in-law continued.
My brother was trying to convince Mia to hand over the gold bars to cover up the affair without it being discovered.
Hearing this, I remarked.
Thomas said he was gambling, thinking that would convince me?
Brother-in-law replied.
He started gambling on his own, hoping to pay off without any help. But as his savings dwindled, he became desperate and tried to persuade Mia to give him the gold bars.
That explains the time my husband begged for money. I thought to myself. When I asked.
And then?
Brother-in-law continued.
A few days later, when Mia wouldn't agree, Thomas called again, saying we'd execute the burglary plan on a day Mia was out. He promised me a share if we succeeded, so I followed his instructions and committed the crime.
Hearing this, I realized my husband had his brother do it, likely because he knew his own physique and mannerisms might give him away. Not only was Dad's inheritance stolen, but I also learned of the affair, and I decided it was over with my husband. Just as brother-in-law had confessed, my husband returned home.
Mia, I've heard about what happened. Are you hurt? Everything okay?
He asked, putting on a poorly acted concern. Unaware of brother-in-law's confession, my husband was puzzled by the cold looks around him, saying, Well, losing Dad's precious inheritance is sad, but what's lost is lost, right? We can rebuild our fortune together from scratch. Trying to dismiss the police and grab my shoulder. Disgusted by my husband after hearing everything from brother-in-law, I pushed him away, saying, "Stop. Don't touch me." Surprised, he looked at me. "Mia, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You're scared of the police, right? Let's talk, just the two of us." Trying to drag me outside forcibly. I resisted, but he was too strong and dragged me along, leaving me feeling helpless. The police intervened. She said to stop, so let her go, restraining him with several officers. "Everything from the burglary plan to your affair has been exposed," the police informed him as he struggled and attempted to flee. However, his escape was futile and he was caught. Thus, the gold bars were safely returned to me. The day after the burglary incident, still in disbelief, I muttered to myself, "I never imagined a burglary could happen at my house." Unforgivable actions by my husband and brother-in-law led me to file a lawsuit immediately. While my husband received a suspended sentence, brother-in-law, having no job and supporting himself through crime, was found guilty of other offenses and received a prison sentence. Brother-in-law had the tools for the job, and it wasn't his first time breaking safes. I hoped this would be a wake-up call for others involved in crime. Mother-in-law, devastated by her son's actions, tearfully said, "I hope they fully pay for their crimes." My heart ached, but preventing further victims was necessary. I demanded compensation from my husband and his mistress. My husband, now facing a slew of misfortunes, desperately pleaded, "Let's not divorce, Mia. It was all my fault. I only love you. I can't pay the compensation." Resorting to tears, but I felt no sympathy and refused to forgive him. "How are you planning to cash them? Did you really think you could just walk into a shop with a large amount of gold bars and smoothly sell them? You need a personal number to sell something of this size. Did you think you could just use the inheritance I received as you pleased?" Stumbling over his words, my husband admitted, "When you put it that way, yes." He knew he had no right to decide how to use my inherited wealth. Blinded by immediate financial gain, you didn't think through the consequences of your actions, I told him, and he could only look down, silent. Searching for a way to break into such a sturdy safe, committing a crime to get his hands on it. Yet not thinking about the aftermath at all was absurdly foolish. I announced our divorce right there and then. Finally, after all the procedures were completed, I felt relieved. The move, funded by my husband's compensation, was completed. I became a free person. As for my husband, his misdeeds were exposed to his company, leading to his job loss. Disowned by his family and with no savings, he began doing day labor to pay the compensation. Struggling with his deteriorating life and failing workplace relationships. It seems he planned another burglary due to being unable to cope with these challenges. Naturally, without any accomplices, he was caught by the returning residents and beaten. "It's the second time. Please have mercy," my husband reportedly pleaded, but the residents mercilessly called the police. He was sentenced to prison. This time, he truly couldn't return to a normal life. The burglary occurred near my previous home, and I heard the story directly from the neighbor involved. After the first burglary at my former house, my husband became well known throughout the neighborhood. Without the means to go far, he committed another crime nearby. Finally, we parted with, "It's a dangerous world out there. Let's both be careful. Take care." After the trial, mother-in-law was mentally damaged and struggled to recover. So, I frequently visited and maintained our relationship. I wanted to do everything I could for mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me. Thanks to my care, mother-in-law gradually recovered. We still have a good relationship today. I want to live my life gratefully for the peaceful days and the people around me, hoping for this tranquility to last forever.
Ah. Look, it's the bitch.
My 6-year-old daughter pointed at the woman who had come to our house. Today was the day my son brought his fiancée over. I quickly lowered my daughter's pointing hand and bowed repeatedly to the fiancé, embarrassed by the terrible thing my daughter had said to her. Upon hearing this, my daughter looked up at me with pure curiosity and said,
"But, sis was happy being called a bitch."
"My name is Trinity. At 31, I'm living my life juggling work and parenting. You could say I'm a working mom. My husband, Michael, is also 31. A kind and justice-driven man, Michael is a well-respected salesman within his company. He's supportive in both childcare and household chores, always taking the initiative without me having to ask. It's truly a blessing, especially when I come home tired from work. Marrying Michael was the best decision of my life. Every day, I'm grateful for my husband, Michael. Our daughter, Yasmin, is 6 years old. Full of growth and energy, Yasmin's curiosity knows no bounds. Every day she discovers something new and excitedly shouts,
"Mom, look!"
enjoying her own little world. It's a relief when she can play by herself, especially when I'm tied up with household chores. Reaching my 30s, I've noticed a waning interest in the wider world, making Yasmin's daily joy frankly enviable. With my husband often away on business trips, he's mostly home only on weekends and holidays. Since I often work weekends too, the days when the whole family is together are rare. However, we're a close-knit family, making the most of our time together, whether we're going on trips or playing locally. Our family relationship is very healthy. Occasionally, my mom, who lives nearby, comes over to visit. Yasmin adores my mom, always exclaiming,
"Grandma! Grandma!"
in excitement. It's heartwarming to see my mom happily respond with a
"Yes"
to Yasmin's calls. For me, busy with work, my mom's presence is invaluable. Compared to mom, I've always had a strained relationship with my dad. There's no clear reason, but our personalities just don't mesh. We have different perspectives, and it seems we disagree on everything. You encounter such people at work too, but the best strategy is usually to keep your distance. It seems Dad feels the same way, hardly ever showing up at my house. Even when I introduced Michael, Dad opposed our marriage. His reason being, "Something about him just doesn't sit right. Something about him just doesn't sit right." Such a selfish reason. To oppose the person your daughter has seriously chosen to be with, just because you don't like something about them, is just too selfish. My already poor relationship with Dad only worsened after he opposed our marriage. But I went ahead and married Michael, ignoring my dad's opposition, because it's my life. Maybe out of a sense of guilt, I found myself avoiding Dad after the wedding. I get along well with Michael's parents, my in-laws, who live far away. When we can take long vacations in summer and winter, I take Michael and Yasmin to visit them. Yasmin has been familiar with them since she was little, so she's not shy at all and is very dear to them. I've always been close to my brother Trevor, who is 5 years older. Our attachment to each other might seem a bit unusual to some. We even exchange emails daily. I share updates about Yasmin's growth and family events, while Trevor vents about work. Whenever something about Yasmin troubles me, talking to Trevor usually helps me forget by the next day. That's how important Trevor is to me. Currently, Trevor, who works for a major corporation, is not only kind and stylish but also handsome. It's a wonder why he doesn't have a girlfriend. Though he's popular, he seems uninterested in romance. His lack of interest in love is, ironically, what draws women to him, something Trevor hasn't realized. Despite everything, we've been living a happy life, supported by a loving family. Then one day, I got a phone call.
Hello? Trinity? It's me.
The caller, unusually, was Trevor. Maybe it was just my imagination, but Trevor's voice seemed unusually lively.
I've got a fiancé.
My intuition was right.
No way. Congratulations. That's great, Trevor.
I was as happy for my beloved Trevor as if the good news were my own. A smile naturally spread across my face.
Trevor, you're so cool but never seemed interested in love. You finally met the right person. I'm so happy for you. So, who is she?
When I asked, Trevor said a bit shyly.
She's someone you'd get along with, really kind. I'll introduce her when you come to our parents' house in 3 months.
In 3 months, got it. Let me know when it's closer, and I'll take time off work. And with one more.
Congratulations.
I ended the call with Trevor. Even after hanging up, my excitement didn't fade. My beloved Trevor was getting married. I wondered what his partner was like, hoping we'd get along well. Filled with anticipation, I looked forward to the 3 months until Trevor's visit. Then, one day, on the way back from picking up my daughter Yasmin from the childcare center, she suddenly said,
Mom, I want to have a doggy.
A doggy?
You mean a dog? What brought this on all of a sudden?
Yasmin likes dogs, but has never said she wanted one. Maybe one of Yasmin's friends at the childcare center got a dog and told her about it.
Because Dad called someone a doggy the other day.
Yasmin gave an answer that I wasn't sure made any sense. Michael called someone a doggy? Would he say something like that? Feeling puzzled, I casually asked Yasmin about it. Did Dad really say that to you? Why would he? But Yasmin seemed to have lost interest in dogs already, now talking to a flower blooming nearby.
Hello, Mr. Flower. Hello, Mr. Flower.
Maybe it's not something to worry about too much. That's what I thought, but even after we got home, took a shower with Yasmin, and ate dinner, the doggy Michael mentioned wouldn't leave my mind. After Michael got home and Yasmin was put to bed, I decided to ask him directly. Hey, this might sound like a weird question, but what's this doggy thing about? Michael seemed momentarily flustered by my question, then said with a bit of panic.
Oh. I went to a pet shop for work recently and saw some puppies. It made me think how nice it would be to have a dog. You know, they say kids grow up kinder with pets around.
So, the doggy Michael mentioned was about a puppy he saw at the pet shop. He must have talked to Yasmin about the puppies.
Oh, so that's what it was. I was curious because it's not like you to talk about wanting a dog.
Hearing the answer directly from Michael, I felt relieved. It's nothing to worry about, you're overthinking it. Michael said with a laugh, so I decided not to dwell on it any further. 3 months had passed since Trevor's marriage announcement, and the day he was coming home finally arrived. Michael had work and said he would come after it was done, so Yasmin and I headed to my parents' house first. Mom, who seemed happy that Trevor was coming, greeted us with,
Trinity, come in, come in.
Smiling more joyously than usual. Unlike with me, Dad, who gets along well with Trevor, was in a good mood for this occasion. Until Trevor and his fiancée arrived, I helped Mom with cooking. We wanted to welcome Trevor and his fiancée with the best celebration possible. Yasmin was playing with Dad. The table was filled with Trevor's favorite dishes and the favorite foods of Trevor's fiancée, which I had asked about beforehand. Looking at the dishes laid out, I felt a bit of unease. It kind of resembles Michael's favorite dishes. But it must be a coincidence. As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang, and Trevor and his fiancée appeared. Michael hadn't finished work yet and wasn't there, but we started the meet and greet with just the family. Trevor's fiancée is apparently named Riley. I could hear Mom from the entrance.
Welcome, Riley.
Mom greeted them, and the two stepped into the living room where Dad, Yasmin, and I were. At that moment, a voice came from beside me. Not a blessing, but an unexpected remark.
Ah. Look, it's the bitch.
Pointing at Riley, the voice was Yasmin's, who continued pointing while laughing. Riley, with her beautiful face, looked puzzled at Yasmin.
Yasmin. That's rude to our guest.
I scolded her, and Yasmin made a sullen face and said,
Because Dad called her that. And Big Sis looked so happy about it. Why is it okay for Dad to say it, but not me? I was just playing with Dad when Mom wasn't around.
Yasmin's baffling statement had me, Mom, Dad, and Trevor all scratching our heads. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Michael, having finished work, arrived. I went to welcome Michael, who then entered the living room. And that's when things took a sudden turn.
Cheater!
A voice suddenly erupted. Looking towards the source, it was Michael, his face red with anger, yelling at Trevor's fiancée, Riley.
Why are you here? What's the meaning of this? Is this some kind of harassment?
Michael was uncontrollably furious. His unusual behavior puzzled everyone else. Michael seemed to not even notice me, our parents, or Yasmin. Then, Riley, Trevor's fiancée, started raising her voice. Gone was her gentle demeanor, now replaced by a harsh tone, furrowing her brows.
Why are you here? And why should I be the one blamed? You were the one who came on to me. I was never serious about you.
Riley was infuriated, blood rushing to her head. Although initially shocked, I began to understand the nature of their conversation was about an affair.
You're the one who said you wanted me to come over on holidays. I went out of my way for you, and this is how it ends. Give me back my weekends.
Michael and Riley had been having an affair. And it seems they were using the weekends when I wasn't around for their escapades. They apparently enjoyed treating each other like pets frequently. Yasmin must have seen this. That's why she started talking about Doggy in such a strange way. The reason the prepared food resembled Michael's favorites makes sense now. They must have been dining out together often. All the pieces of unease clicked together in my mind. Realizing the truth, I immediately took Yasmin's hand and left the living room. I couldn't let Yasmin hear any of this. Whatever happens with Michael can be dealt with later, but Yasmin must be protected at all costs. Then Mom appeared and gently placed her hand on me.
I'll stay with Yasmin.
It was her way of telling me to go back. I nodded and headed back to the living room. Inside, the heated argument between Michael and Riley continued. The conversation revolved mainly around their affair. It was too much for me to bear, feeling dizzy just listening to them.
Wait, just a minute.
Finding a moment to interrupt their exchange was impossible. Their back and forth was intense and unrelenting. After several minutes, their argument finally began to subside. As they became aware of us around them, both crumbled to their knees, faces turning pale.
Michael, what is this? Explain yourself.
The moment I began to confront Michael, he collapsed backward with a groan.
Enough. You are no longer family or anything to me. Get out now. Don't you dare touch my daughter.
It was Dad who struck Michael.
You too, don't ever come back.
Dad said this to Riley, then, with Riley and Michael unable to move, he pulled them by the arms and threw them out of the front door. And with one last remark, he spat out, "You two deserve the worst." In a setting meant for marriage introductions, Michael and Riley were thrown out for their affair being exposed. Afterward, I demanded a divorce and compensation from Michael in court. Ignoring Michael's futile pleas of, "Let's talk it over," I proceeded with the divorce. "It's too late to talk things over now. If you hadn't done anything in the first place, we wouldn't be in this situation." That was the last thing I said to Michael. Trevor, of course, called off his engagement with Riley. "We're never going to see each other again. Don't contact me." Riley, in tears, pleaded with Trevor to reconsider the broken engagement. "Please. I won't see that man again. Just give me one more chance." But Trevor, like me, dismissed Riley. People who do such things once will do them again. He then demanded compensation for the broken engagement from Riley. After the divorce, rumors of Michael's affair quickly spread throughout his company and to his clients, eroding the trust he had slowly built up. He was transferred to a department with no work to do, leading a life devoid of excitement. Riley, having quit her job in anticipation of marrying Trevor, found herself in debt due to the compensation payments. She ended up juggling multiple part-time jobs, working tirelessly every day without a break. Riley's dream of an easy life through marriage to Trevor turned into a nightmare of the exact opposite. Her ideal wedding plans were shattered overnight. It's true what they say, wrongdoing doesn't pay. Having closed the chapter on Michael, I returned home with Yasmin. Mom looked at me, slightly worn out, and asked with concern,
Trinity, are you okay?
"Mom, I'm fine. It's good that Yasmin found out before she got any older. Some of it might stick in her memory, though." Then, to Dad, who was reading the newspaper in the living room. Dad, who had struck Michael at that moment. I could never have been as decisive. "Dad, thank you for what you did with Michael. You were right. I was swept up in the moment thinking he was the one, but I should have been more discerning in judging people." When I apologized to Dad, he looked up from his newspaper and said to me, "Trinity, I'm sorry. I should have been more assertive in stopping you. I thought it would make you unhappy, but I didn't have a clear reason. Just not liking someone isn't enough for you to be convinced, right? Maybe I was just convinced that Dad and I didn't get along, that we weren't close. It's not your fault, Dad. I've learned a lot from this experience." Laughing together, Dad and I looked at each other as if to say, what was all that past conflict about? That's just how family relationships are, it seems. Misunderstanding each other for no reason, and before you know it, making up. I hope Yasmin and I can build that kind of relationship from now on. As for Trevor, he was shocked by Riley's affair and insisted he didn't want a girlfriend for a while. I'm done with that kind of pain. To think that the person I was about to marry was having an affair with my sister's husband. After living as a bachelor for some time, nursing his wounds, Trevor finally began to move on from Riley. He eventually married someone from a company he was dealing with. Trevor's new wife, a beautiful and wonderful woman, was truly deserving to walk by his side. "Can I tell Uncle?" "Really?" My 7-year-old niece said this as she alternated her gaze between my son and my husband. My son is about to turn 3, but he still can't speak. My niece, talking as if she's having a conversation with my son, looked up at my husband with a worried expression. "Uncle, you see, my name is Melanie. I work at a staffing agency, and my husband, Timothy, works at the same company. Timothy and I met as colleagues at the company, and since we were close in age, we started dating through work consultations and eventually got married. Then, I became pregnant with our son, Hunter, and took maternity leave and parental leave. When Hunter turned 1, we looked for a childcare center to enroll him in, and I went back to work as planned, originally intending to return immediately. While sending our child to the childcare center, I worked to get back into the pace of work, and with Timothy's help, we managed to get through the busy days of work and childcare without any spare time. When we absolutely couldn't manage, or when Hunter got sick and had to leave the childcare center early, Madison, my mother-in-law who lives nearby, would often pick him up from the childcare center or watch over Hunter while I did household chores. We were very grateful, but Madison gradually started suggesting that we should quit the childcare center. In fact, Hunter was relatively advanced compared to children his age. He began walking just after turning 1, and though not yet conversational, he understood our words and could communicate simply. Madison started treating Hunter like a prodigy, insisting he shouldn't be in a public childcare center but rather receive gifted education under her constant care. This suggestion had us worried. While we were indebted to her, we tried to refuse politely by saying Hunter enjoyed the childcare center, which only made Madison furious. She didn't like that I had returned to work while Hunter was still so young and berated us, saying, "You don't love Hunter. Leaving him in childcare all day is negligent. Unlike you, I would be willing to stay with him all the time and take care of everything. Just hand Hunter over to me." I was shocked by Madison's accusation of being a bad mother, but I was even more frightened by her treating Hunter as an object to be handed over. After that, we tried not to rely on Madison, and if Timothy wasn't home when she came over, I pretended to be out. However, Madison started taking actions that couldn't be ignored, like picking up Hunter from childcare without our consent or trying to steal our house keys after bringing over sweets and insisting on coming in. Timothy, too, gave up on reasoning with her after seeing her unreasonableness. We decided to move without telling Madison and began looking for a new place in secret. However, finding a new home proved difficult. We thought it would be easy to find a house in a growing city, but with many people moving in, convenient properties sold quickly. While searching for a house behind Madison's back proved difficult, half a year flew by in no time. By then, Madison's interest in Hunter had waned significantly. Actually, even at a year and a half, Hunter still wasn't speaking at all. He used to babble a lot when he was younger, but lately, he's been completely silent except when crying. Taking him to the hospital worriedly, we found nothing abnormal. We were told that language development varies greatly among children and to keep a careful watch, so we went home carrying our worries. Seeing Hunter like this, Madison did a complete turnaround from treating him as a prodigy, declaring, "Not speaking much just means he's a disabled child. There must be something wrong with Melanie's body, and that's why she gave birth to a strange child. I don't know why Timothy ever married someone like her." And she labeled it as a disease. Despite the doctor's diagnosis, being told Hunter was sick and that I was abnormal brought me to tears. Madison hadn't been coming to our house recently, but when she did, it was unbearable how she could say such awful things, leaving me completely distraught. Then, Timothy got angrier than I've ever seen, declared we were cutting ties with Madison, and forcefully kicked her out of the house. After blocking Madison's contacts, we began to ignore her completely, even if she came to the house. Knowing Timothy's firm stance, Madison shouted, "I don't need a wife or grandson with disabilities," and never returned to our house again. Since then, we have been living peacefully as a family of 3, and before we knew it, Hunter turned 3, yet he still hadn't spoken a word. Considering it unusual for him not to speak by this point, we were advised at a public health screening to have Hunter examined at a major hospital. When Hunter and I went to the hospital recommended to us, we unexpectedly ran into my sister Yasmin and my niece Rose, who were there for vaccinations. Yasmin and Rose live far away, and because we had been busy, it had been difficult to meet, so we were delighted by this long-awaited reunion. Since Yasmin and Rose hadn't met Hunter since his birth, they greeted him for the first time.
What's your name? Hunter? That's cool. Yes, you're in the rabbit class, aren't you? Rose loves rabbits too.
Despite not having mentioned Hunter's childcare class to Rose, she naturally continued the conversation as if it was obvious. Surprised, I asked Yasmin, and she said that Rose can understand the language of animals and babies, who can't speak. Half in doubt, yet having witnessed it firsthand, I had no choice but to believe. When the four of us went to the hospital cafeteria for lunch, Rose said,
"Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers." "Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers."
Accurately guessing Hunter's likes and dislikes without being told, which left me speechless. Even after seeing the doctor, the reason why Hunter wouldn't speak remained a mystery. There were no issues with his throat or vocal cords. He could cry and laugh, but he wouldn't utter meaningful words like mom or dad. Feeling down about not finding a solution, Timothy came to pick us up from the hospital after his rounds in the evening. Since we were together, we decided to have dinner as a family of 5, moving to a family restaurant near the hospital. While waiting for our order to arrive, Rose looked back and forth between Hunter and Timothy, then stared at Timothy anxiously.
"Hunter is asking when he can start talking to Uncle," she said.
Surprised, Timothy looked at me, so I told him about how Rose had correctly guessed things she shouldn't know, like class names and Hunter's likes and dislikes, leaving Timothy to let out a disbelieving sigh.
"Hunter really wants to talk to both Uncle and Auntie. But he couldn't because Grandma was always around, and he was afraid of being taken away," Rose conveyed.
The phrase "always around" caught my attention, and I asked Rose for clarification, given that we hadn't been seeing Madison lately. Hunter shook his head and just stared at Rose. Then, as if struck by a brilliant idea, Rose clapped her hands together, smiled joyfully, and reassured Hunter.
"Grandma isn't here now, so it's okay to talk."
Hunter looked around uncertainly, then at me and Timothy.
"Mom, Dad, is Grandma really not here?"
Hunter's words came out so fluently that Timothy and I were shocked. As Yasmin calmed us down in our near panic, Hunter reached out his arms, asking to be held. Hastily, I lifted him from the child's seat onto my lap, where he grabbed my hands and happily kicked his legs.
"When I was a baby, Grandma said she was going to take me home to talk a lot. I didn't talk because I liked Dad and Mom's house better."
Hunter had simply chosen not to speak. This must have been around when he was about a year old. Recalling Madison's insistence on gifted education and her wanting to take him home. Furthermore, Hunter expressed his desire to talk to Timothy and me but felt he couldn't.
"Because Grandma is always there. Inside Hunter's home, in the car, even at the rabbit class," he said.
I was baffled by how Madison, who didn't live with us, could always be there, even in the car or at the childcare center. Then, remembering the timing of Madison's visits. On days we hadn't told her about hospital visits or when we received notifications about language training, Madison invariably showed up. Whispering my dreadful suspicion to Timothy, he looked at Hunter in dismay. "Can you tell where Grandma is in the house?" Timothy's soft question led Hunter to list several locations. Hearing his responses, Timothy's face turned red, and he trembled with emotion. Apologizing to Hunter for not noticing, we thanked Yasmin and Rose for their help before rushing home to confirm our bad hunch and take necessary actions. Once home, we asked Hunter again where Madison could be. Pointing with his little hands, Hunter showed us various places. Under the entrance shoe cabinet, behind the living room sofa, on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet, and when a device was found under the bedroom bed, I felt dizzy.
When Grandma came to pick me up, she left it behind. Grandma has always been in the house,
Hunter explained, indicating that what seemed to be bugging devices had been left throughout our home, making it feel as though Madison was perpetually present. Discovering such devices within our home, similar to those seen on TV, and confirming their nature as surveillance devices available in abundance online was unsettling. Before the police arrived, Madison showed up at our house, having apparently been listening in on us as we searched for the bugs. Timothy couldn't hold back his fury, confronting Madison.
"Mom, what do you think you're doing, planting bugs in our house like it's nothing? This is outrageous, creepy, and a serious crime. It's because Timothy ignored my contacts, isn't it? What's so wrong with wanting to know more about one's own family? We're family, after all. There's no need to make such a big fuss about this. More importantly, Hunter can speak. To think he can talk so much at 3, he must be gifted. Just as I thought, a real prodigy. I'll take him and provide him with gifted education, so he can work at a big company in the future. And eventually, he can take care of me in my old age. Now I can rest easy."
Madison showed no remorse for planting the listening devices, dismissing it as nothing significant. Her blatant disregard for Hunter's wishes and her self-centered assertions made us feel sick. Just as we were considering our next steps, the police arrived. After we explained the situation and the police confirmed with Madison herself, who didn't think she had done anything wrong, she readily admitted to planting the devices and was promptly taken into custody. Despite her resistance and insistence on her innocence, revealing the locations of the devices led to her being packed into a police car and taken to the station. Following Madison's confession, a specialist recommended by the police found numerous listening devices in our home and car. The realization that we hadn't noticed such extensive surveillance was embarrassing. The thought of Madison having heard all our conversations made us dizzy. In the end, Madison was arrested for burglary and criminal mischief, showing no signs of remorse for her excessive actions, even though it was her son and DIL's home. Furthermore, during the interrogation, Madison confessed to also planting listening devices at the childcare center. Just as Hunter had said, she had bugged the class he attended. She had paid a staff member, who was a friend, to install them. An investigation at the child care center indeed found several devices. The staff member who assisted Madison faced serious legal consequences and disciplinary action. Timothy was deeply affected by his mother's disturbing behavior. But most importantly, for Hunter and me, we decided to move away from this town filled with unpleasant memories as quickly as possible while Madison was preoccupied with police proceedings, seeking a peaceful life. Considering our job situations, we decided to move near Yasmin's family. Upon explaining our circumstances, Yasmin's family was shocked but understanding, offering their sympathy and saying,
"You've been through a lot, well done."
With Yasmin's family helping with the move, everything went smoothly. Since then, despite it being her first offense, Madison received a prison sentence due to the malicious, cunning nature of her actions, which were premeditated and carried out with clear intent. Despite Madison's full confession, she seemed unable to comprehend why her attempts to learn more about her family were met with such serious consequences, ranting and causing a scene at the police station, claiming,
"Let me out of here! I was just trying to get to know my family better. I've done nothing wrong."
When we were informed by the new residents of our old home about a letter filled with grievances and demands for release that Madison sent, it was a stark reminder of how fortunate we were to have moved to a place beyond her reach, and the thought of what could have happened if Hunter had been taken by her sent shivers down our spine. Now, free from Madison's watchful eyes and with Hunter able to speak without any reservations, our family enjoys brighter and more communicative days together. Hunter's verbal skills are impressively advanced for a 3-year-old, leading us to wonder if he might indeed be what Madison claimed, a gifted child. However, this does not justify Madison's actions, nor does it mean we are willing to forgive her. Living closer to Yasmin's family has enriched our lives with increased interactions, and Yasmin has been a great help with tasks like picking Hunter up from childcare, which Madison used to handle. Our weekends are now filled with joyous outings to amusement parks, zoos, and trips planned together, fostering a close and supportive relationship. Reflecting on the hardships Hunter endured, we are determined to compensate for the past by ensuring he grows up in an environment where he can freely express himself without restraint, committed to never letting him feel suppressed again. No employee by that name works here, I'm afraid. I realized my husband Cody left something behind when he went on a business trip, so I called his office and told his name. To my surprise, they said no such person worked there. What could this mean? Suspicious, I started rummaging through Cody's belongings in his room. Then, from his luggage, I found something shocking, something unbelievable. When I found this astonishing truth, I decided to revenge. My name is Rachel Thunderbolt. This year marks my 3rd year of marriage to Cody. Since I was the only daughter, Cody became an adopted son-in-law of the Thunderbolt family to carry on our name, and his last name became Thunderbolt too. He gladly accepted to take on my family's name. We had a blissful marriage, usually busy with our jobs, but we promised to have a baby someday. I could never have predicted our happy life would come to such a sudden end. It all started on the day Cody left for his business trip. While cleaning his room, I found a large envelope. It looked like important documents for his trip.
Oh no!
I tried calling Cody, but his cell phone was off and I couldn't reach him. Maybe he was on a plane or on Amtrak train, going through the tunnel. Thinking it urgent, I called his company next. Hello, this is Seven Forest Corporation.
I'm Cody Thunderbolt's wife. He forgot something important and I need to contact him right away.
Cody Thunderbolt. Please hold for a moment. The man on the phone, presumably Cody's colleague, sounded perplexed. Soon, the call was put on hold, and music began to play. After being on hold for about 3 minutes, the same man returned with an odd word. I'm sorry, but we don't have an employee named Cody Thunderbolt. Are you sure you have the right company?
What? But you are Seven Forest Corporation, right?
Yes, that's correct, but I was certain it was Cody's workplace. I double-checked the phone number, and it wasn't a common company name. Despite repeatedly confirming the company name and address, they kept insisting they had no employee by that name. All right, thank you. Sorry to bother you. I hung up the phone, utterly confused, but one thing was certain. Cody was lying about something. With a mix of confusion and a desire to find some clue, I searched his room again. And there, in his bag, I found an employee ID card for Seven Forest Corporation. It had his photo on it. He definitely worked there, no doubt about it. But the name written here. It said Cody Harris, a completely different last name. Confused and dizzy, I squatted down. I took a deep breath to calm my mind. Cody had a big secret. Convinced of this, I couldn't just sit still. I went straight to a private investigator to look into his background. Cody's business trip, if his words were right, was for a week. The investigator was skilled, and I got the report before Cody returned. But the content was shocking. To put it bluntly, Rachel Thunderbolt, you're single.
What? I don't understand what you mean.
Cody has another family.
Does that mean he's cheating on me?
Well, it's more like you're the other woman.
What?
According to the investigator, there was no marriage record between me and Cody. He had another family, with whom he was legally married, so they were his real wife and children. Was I not married? What does this mean? It was a shockingly unbelievable fact. After receiving the report from the investigator, I couldn't say anything and rode the bus home, absent-minded.
We'll need quite a bit of money for a wedding, huh? I can't afford it right now, but one day we'll definitely have one. I'll work harder so we can also go on a honeymoon.
3 years ago, Cody said that with a refreshing smile and promised, "It's okay if we don't have a wedding. I'm happy as is." I smiled and said that. His parents had passed away, leaving him all alone, so we only reported our marriage to my parents. Since I was the only daughter, he took the initiative to take on the Thunderbolt name. Of course, my parents were delighted with this. We signed the marriage application, but around that time, I got busy at work and couldn't find time to go to the city office with him. "Rachel, you're busy, right? I'll submit it when the time is right." So, I entrusted him with the application, assuming he had submitted it. But in reality, he never did, and so Cody and I were just strangers. We both had different jobs and social insurance, and we kept our finances separate. So, something that should have been apparent from tax documents or something went completely unnoticed. Cody must have known and done it on purpose. I believed we were married and lived as such. Thinking about it made me feel a deep anger rising within me. A week passed, and it was the day Cody returned home. I left work early to wait for him.
Cody, we need to talk.
As soon as he entered the living room with the carry-on bag he used for his trip, I talked to him. "What?" "I have souvenirs, you know," he said nonchalantly. Seeing that just made me angrier.
Your real name is Cody Harris, isn't it? What?
I confronted Cody with the employee ID card I found in his room, and he looked shaken for a moment.
Well, I just kept Harris as my name at work. What are you talking about? When we met, you called yourself Cody Smith. Did I? I don't remember.
Cody tried to feign ignorance, but I presented him with the private investigator's report.
I went behind your back, sorry, but I had a private investigator look into you. You have another family, and I was just a fling, right?
He seemed taken aback by the evidence, but quickly tried to regain composure with a smile.
It wasn't just a fling. I take everything seriously. Don't give me that. You clearly said you'd submit our marriage application. Did I say that? Then how come we're not married? Why is that?
Cody kept making irresponsible words, trying to dodge my questioning. His careless attitude only made me more stressed. You were the one who said, "It's okay if we don't have a wedding. I'm happy as is."
That's different. This is a case of bigamy, a violation of the law.
That's fine. Since I never submitted the marriage application with you, it's not bigamy.
So my feelings don't matter at all.
Finally, my anger exploded. I slammed the table, causing a glass to topple and water to spill onto the floor. "Ah, you're so noisy. I didn't think you were such a troublesome woman." Cody picked up his carry-on bag again and opened the living room door. "Then, I'm going home."
Going home? Where to?
To my real home, obviously. It seems like a hassle to stay with you now. I won't come here for a while. Cool off in the meantime. Leaving these words as if I was the villain, Cody left the house.
Coward! Irresponsible man!
I threw a tissue box, but the front door closed mercilessly, and Cody never came back after that. I won't let this go. Didn't he realize in these 3 years that I'm not a woman who would just let things slide? I decided to make Cody pay for this. The next day, I called Misty Harris, Cody's legal wife, whose number was in the investigator's report. A woman answered, and I could hear a boy's voice in the background. "Hello, are you Misty Harris, Cody's wife?" Yes, I am. My name is Rachel Thunderbolt. I've been, well acquainted with Cody. Unsure how to start, my words trailed off, and Misty sounded very puzzled. I briefly explained the situation and arranged to meet her in person soon. At a coffee shop, as soon as we met, Misty glared at me with disdain. You have the nerve to show up after messing with someone else's husband. Wait, please. I'm a victim too. I showed her the investigator's report and explained everything in detail. I still can't believe I was the other woman. Cody doing such a thing. Unforgivable. Misty believed me after seeing the evidence and was visibly furious. I understand the situation now. Not only did he play with your feelings, Rachel, but he's also been deceiving me all this time. So, I want to punish Cody, and I need your help. All right, I'll help you. And so, we conspired together to plan our revenge on Cody. The day of reckoning came. On his day off, Cody was relaxing in front of the TV at Misty's house. Their elementary school-aged child was out with friends, so seizing the moment, I stormed into the house. Your other wife has graciously come to visit, Misty announced, leading me to the living room. Cody, who had been lounging, sprang up in shock at the sight of me. Geez! Rachel! Long time no see, Cody. What? Why? How? Cody, in confusion, pointed alternately between us. What's this? When did you two meet? Misty and I have become very close friends. Huh. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Misty's parents, along with Cody's, arrived, looking furious. Cody, who was lounging around in sweatpants, straightened up quickly. What? What brings everyone here together? He was completely intimidated by their devilish expressions. Rachel, did you set this up? I got Misty's help too. So, Cody, you have no allies here. By yesterday, Misty had already told her parents that Cody was cheating. I had managed to get the contact details of Cody's parents, who were actually alive, and sent them a registered letter with the investigator's report and a summary of everything that had happened. And I called them here for Cody's punishment. What are you doing? What's your aim with all this? First, you have something you need to do, right? You know what it is? You want money? No! You should start with an apology. Pressed by my stern words, Cody looked pleadingly at Misty, who just stared back expressionlessly. We'll demand compensation after you've done what you should. Right, Cody! Misty and I towered over Cody, who had squatted down in exhaustion. Both Misty's and Cody's parents surrounded him with stern looks. Wait, if you two are getting along so well, there's no need to fight, right? Why not keep things as they are, maintain both families? Even in this situation, Cody tried to escape responsibility. He was just alpha an irresponsible person. I like both of you, I wanted to maintain good relationships, something like that. His shameless attitude was almost refreshing in its thoroughness. But both sets of parents berated him fiercely. Are you joking? Don't you feel sorry for Misty and Rachel? Shouts and tearful voices filled the air, and Cody shrank back, letting out a pathetic whimper. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. I understand exactly what you want. You do? So we can keep things this way, right? No way! I'm utterly disappointed. I'm breaking up with you. And I'll be expecting compensation, so make sure you're prepared. What? No. As I declared my decision to part ways, Misty followed suit. I'm divorcing you too. Expect to pay compensation and child support. I don't ever want to see your face again. Get out. Cody looked up at me, his eyes tearing, and tried to plead. Before I say, don't think of coming back to my place. I won't let you in. I'll apologize properly. Let's submit our marriage application this time, right? Let's get married.
Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see you again. Goodbye.
Cody was disowned by his parents then and there, losing his last refuge. He was ousted from Misty's house by everyone present and stood dazed outside the gate. That was the anticlimactic end of our relationship. Now, for the epilogue. Cody, having to pay us compensation and losing everything, stayed at cheap hotels and internet cafes. But after my call to his company about his business trip raised suspicion, his boss confronted him, and his double life was exposed. The whole company found out through the colleague who took the call, so Cody quit his job, fleeing in shame. True to his irresponsible nature, he ran away just because he felt uncomfortable, despite having no money. Eventually, Cody ran out of money and became homeless, as I heard. As for me, I ended my relationship with Cody, but the emotional scars of spending 3 years as the other woman didn't heal easily. I buried myself in work to forget, leading to a life consumed by my job. A male colleague, concerned about me, asked, "Is something wrong?" and we started going out for drinks together. While venting over drinks, I found myself crying, but he just silently supported me. Having lost trust in people, I began to feel that maybe I could trust this man, and we started dating. I'm experiencing a modest happiness now. Someday, I'm sure I'll find true happiness.